ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति सुपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती वाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य कम करते वाचालम पंकुम लंघयते गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानंद माधवं श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरम्। ओम तत्सत्। हरे कृष्ण। So today we'll be discussing the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, sorry, of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavad. The chapter is entitled How Parikshit Received the Age of Kali. So up until this point, we discussed about how the Lord has left the planet. We discussed about how the Pandavas, before that, the Dhritarashtra left, then how the Pandavas left. When Pandavas left, Kunti Devi, Draupadi, Subhadra, and all the others, they all left the planet. And when Maharaj Parikshit, when Maharaj Yudhishthir left his kingdom and went towards the north, towards the Himalayas, with the desire to give up his body, followed by his brothers, his wife, and mother, he first of all established Maharaj Parikshit, was the son of Abhimanyu, was protected by Lord Krishna when he was in the womb. He was extremely qualified and he was installed as the king. And also it is mentioned Vajranab, the grandson of Krishna, installed as the king of the Yadus. So the story is continuing now. Now the focus of the Bhagavad is coming directly on Parikshit Maharaj and the episodes in the life of Parikshit Maharaj leading to the narration of Srimad Bhagavad. So Suta Goswami narrates in this particular chapter. He starts by explaining to all the Brahmanas, the sages headed by Shaunaka. He explains that Maharaj Parikshit, having received the kingdom from Yudhishthir Maharaj, he started ruling it in a very ideal way. He was extremely qualified, Maharaj Parikshit. He was as qualified as Yudhishthir Maharaj. And he was a great devotee of the Lord right from the beginning. And he was always guided by the best guidance by the great sages. So he was ruling the kingdom exactly like what was foretold by the great rishis before his birth. So this was going on very wonderfully. Maharaj Parikshit married the daughter, married Iravati, who was the daughter of King Uttara, was the son of Virat, and he had 4 sons. And the eldest of his son is known as Janamejaya. So Janamejaya eventually actually becomes the king after Maharaj Parikshit departs. But this is mentioned at this point that he had 4 sons from Iravati, of whom Maharaj Janamejaya was the prominent one. And Maharaj Parikshit was guided by Kripacharya, who served like his spiritual guide. And under the guidance of Kripacharya, the Bhagavad says, Maharaj Parikshit performed 3 Ashwamedha Yajnas on the bank of the Ganga. And it was done very wonderfully. And in the Ashwamedha Yajnas, he ensured he properly remunerated the priests, and he performed all these ceremonies so perfectly, the Bhagavad describes, that actually the devatas from the heavenly planets would come down to earth to receive their offerings, and some of them just to see the yajna. They were visible not only just to the priests and Maharaj Parikshit, but even the common men would actually see the devatas. So scriptures say when the yajnas are performed properly, the devatas who are invoked by the yajna actually appear there to partake of the offerings and bless the yajaman. Obviously, the devatas in general are not visible to ordinary human beings like us. Either one has to be very specially advanced to be able to see them, like the great sages, the great brahmanas, or the devatas must allow themselves to be seen by their own desire. So it is said that the devatas were so pleased with the way Maharaj Parikshit performed the yajnas that to bestow their blessings, they actually not only appeared there and accepted the offerings, but they actually made themselves visible even to the common people. So this is when Dwapar had just about ended and Kali Yuga was just about starting. This is probably amongst the last few yajnas where the devatas would be visible. In fact, the scriptures say, even though it's not mentioned in this chapter, the scriptures say that in Kali Yuga, the devatas are not even interested to come and collect their offerings. Because first of all, they know no yajnas happen, and even if they happen, they are done in such a terrible manner that neither are the priests pure, nor is the yajman having a proper intention or purity, nor is the process properly followed, nor are the ingredients of good quality. So devatas, it is said, rarely come to earth in Kali Yuga. But in previous ages, they would come regularly. So elsewhere in the Bhagavad, there's something very interesting mentioned. It's not part of this chapter. It's something very interesting mentioned, that the wives of the devatas look forward to Kali Yuga coming. Why? Because in all the previous yugas, there are so many yajnas going on that the devatas are busy leaving their abodes and going to earth to collect their offerings and give their blessings. So the wives of the devatas are missing their husbands. They're always on work tour, because that is their profession, right? As devatas. So they're always in a traveling mode. But when it comes to Kali Yuga, because so few offerings are made, the devatas barely leave. So the wives of the devatas are very happy because they say, "Oh, my husband is with me in my in our loka, in our heavenly planet. He rarely has to travel." But obviously, the devatas are not happy because the devatas receive nourishment from the offerings of yajna in Kali Yuga. Anyway, these discussions and these points are actually mentioned subsequently in the subsequent chapters, but I thought I'll just quickly mention this to you. So Maharaj Parikshit was ruling the earth very, very nicely. And he was expanding his kingdom and making sure he performed these 3 Ashwamedha Yajnas, mainly to ensure that practically all part of the earth is properly ruled according to the principles of religion. Because that is the essential responsibility of the executive head of state. He is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is why the king is also known as Naradeva. He is God in human form on earth, because on behalf of God, he has to administer and run the country basis the principles that the Lord has given in the Shastra. It is his responsibility and he's accountable for it. In fact, that is why it is said the king's position or the executive leader's position. So even today, even though we may not have a king like ancient times, whoever is the executive head, whether individually or collectively, they or he are responsible for whatever happens in the kingdom. And scriptures say very explicitly, and this is mentioned elsewhere, not in this chapter, but I will nonetheless mentioning. It is stated in scripture that the executive head gets 1/6 of the good as well as bad karma of all the residents in their country, kingdom, whatever be the case. 1/6, 16.67% roughly of all good and bad karma is inherited by the king, because the king is responsible to facilitate the performance of proper execution of duties. That's why he gets commissioned, so to say, 16%. Similarly, he is liable to be punished because he allowed certain irreligious activities to happen. So that is why in the Vedic tradition, the kings would be very sensitive and responsible to make sure that dharma is properly followed, because they could understand that they are personally responsible and accountable, and they will be punished for any negligence in that regard. Obviously, nowadays we don't see that kind of a keen intent on part of the leadership. In fact, they are least interested whether dharma is followed or not. They are more interested that they get the position and they control, they earn money, and then they pass that position to their son. Then he passes it to his son. But they never actually take accountability, either responsibility or accountability, to actually ensure that dharma is followed. So as he was describing like this about the glories of Maharaj Parikshit, Sud Goswami mentioned that as he was traveling around the world, Maharaj Parikshit, as he was going around, he saw the personality of Kali Yuga, we know as Kali, who's actually an extremely low charactered person, even below a Shudra, extremely low character, who was wearing the dress of a king as if he was a king, and he was with a stick hitting the legs of a cow and a bull. And Sud Goswami mentions that as soon as Maharaj Parikshit saw this episode happening, that a cow and a bull are being hurt, at once the king caught hold of him. Maharaj Parikshit caught hold of this Kali to give him proper punishment. So as soon as this point was mentioned, this point actually attracted the attention of all the sages. This was a very interesting point mentioned, because there are so many questions which come. Who's this cow? Who's this bull? Who's this, this Kali was beating them, why he was beating them, what is the understanding? And more importantly, they were curious to know, and Shaunak Rishi asked this question, that if Kali was actually doing this and Maharaj Parikshit caught him red-handed, because that is the purpose when the king is traveling throughout the kingdom, the purpose is to see that proper administration is happening. If he sees that somewhere improper, sinful behavior is happening, the king is supposed to immediately punish. But this sin is very serious, because this Kali was trying to kill a bull and a cow. So in such a case, why was he simply trying to punish? Why didn't he immediately kill Kali when he caught Kali doing such a crime? That was the question Shaunak Rishi asked, because certain activities must be punished simply punishment. Any ordinary punishment is not sufficient. In fact, he should have killed this Kali because of the crime he was committing. So, having asked this question, Shaunaka Rishi very humbly he poses this question to Sud Goswami, and then he also says, please answer this question. This is my request. We want to understand what exactly was this matter. But you explain all this to us only if it is connected to the glories of the Lord. Because we are here not simply to hear about politics. We are not here simply to hear about some interesting episodes and drama and romance and violence and this. No, we are not interested in a movie story. We are here to discuss topics related to Lord Krishna. So if you think, O Sud Goswami, that the question we have asked and the answer thereof is related to the topics of the Lord, if you think it is going to be beneficial for us as a part of this discussion, then you please tell us. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. We are not interested in a thriller simply for the sake of hearing something exciting. No. So you please decide, because we want to taste the nectar of Krishna consciousness. We want to hear only those things which are actually connected to the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because it is actually those topics which are of real value. This whole material life is so short, and all these so many topics that people are actually interested to hear about, they are actually from a ultimate spiritual perspective, they are actually a waste of time. Why? Because at the end of life, everything is going to go away. Of course, one has to do whatever is needful in terms of maintaining his body, and those topics are not considered a waste. But beyond that, to contemplate, discuss, relish mundane subject matter, which doesn't in any way lead to the spiritual evolution of the soul, which is the actual purpose of human life. Why would we want to discuss about this? That is called as prajalpa. Prajalpa means wasteful, useless talk. So those living entities who want to become free from the influence of Yamaraj, who want to transcend birth and death, they hanker for this kind of deathless nectar that the Bhagavatam is about. Because this nectar is itself eternal, because it is pertaining to the Lord and his pastimes, and it takes us to a deathless state, which means it takes the soul towards immortality. Om asato ma sadgamaya, om tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, om mrityor ma amrutam. Let us go towards immortality. So if the topic is not conducive to that journey, then you can skip answering this question. And let all other less intelligent human beings, lazy and those who are of less intelligence, who uselessly waste their time in eating, sleeping, and performing materialistic activities and idle gossip. If they are interested, let them be interested, but we do not want to waste our time. So obviously, Sud Goswami was pleased to see the sincerity of the sages. But because he deemed that this topic is actually related directly to the Lord and very much a part of the core story about Parikshit and how it led to the various episodes thereafter, he decided to narrate the story about Maharaj Parikshit, which is related to this episode. So Sud Goswami actually starts explaining. So he says that Maharaj Parikshit was already seeing that symptoms of Kali Yuga had already started coming into his kingdom. Now he's answering that question. And he was quite upset. Like what we discussed earlier, Lord Krishna, as long as he was on the planet, Kali stayed away. He didn't actually enter. But as soon as the Lord disappeared, Kali Yuga started exerting its influence very rapidly. And even Maharaj Parikshit would note that. If you remember, Maharaj Yudhishthir had also noted about the symptoms of Kali Yuga coming in, and that is when he asked Bhima the question, is it that Lord Krishna has disappeared from the planet and that is why these symptoms are becoming visible? Yeah. So, of course, then they went to the forest and Maharaj Parikshit could also see. So he decided that this is not a good thing, and because I am the executive head, I need to tour around and make sure things are managed properly and I do not allow improper activities to go. So he actually boarded a chariot, took his weapons, and he was touring the kingdom. And as he was going on, it is said his chariot was drawn by black horses. His flag had a beautiful emblem of a lion. He was surrounded by his army and he left the capital of Hastinapur in all directions. In fact, it is said he traveled all over the world. He conquered practically all parts of the Bhulok. The various Varshas, Bhadrashva, Ketumal, Bharatvarsha, Kimpurushvarsha, so many. And what he would do when he would capture? His intention of capture was not simply to increase the size of his kingdom and loot the prosperity there and make himself more glorious. No. Saintly kings would extend their kingdom with the desire of managing it better in the service of the Lord. So what he would do is, he would capture those kingdoms, or rather either they would accept subjugation by themselves or they would be defeated in battle. And then when they were defeated, they would actually accept subjugation and offer tributes. They would pay taxes to Maharaj Parikshit, and Maharaj Parikshit, the scriptures say, would use the money, the taxes which is given, for the welfare of the citizens. So that is the principle in the scriptures behind taxation. Taxation means the king takes from the income, a part of the income of the citizens, and then uses that money to do welfare for the citizens. Of course, a small part of it is used for the administrative expense and for the upkeep of the royal arrangements. But most of it, and in fact, the scriptures give clear guidance how much taxation is okay according to scripture. They give guidance from the taxation that is collected, how much the king can use for his own expenses. And all the rest, which is practically almost everything, other than a small percentage. I don't have that percentage on top of my head, but I had come across it some time ago. But apart from the small percentage, the rest should be used for the welfare of all the citizens. So that is the purpose of tax collection. A beautiful example is given in the scriptures. It is said, just like when there is sunshine on the lakes, the water in the lakes goes up in the form of water vapor and it forms the clouds. But what do the clouds do? Do the clouds drink the water and take the water for themselves? No. The clouds travel, and in the right place at the right time, they shower back all the water that they have collected from the various lakes and oceans onto the land and all other places, so that those areas are properly nourished. So king's role is like that. He takes taxes and he uses it for the welfare of all living entities, and especially those who need help. So that is the principle. So Maharaj Parikshit, in that spirit, went around visiting all these various kingdoms and making sure that the right arrangements were there and right taxes were given, so that he could properly execute the principles of dharma for the overall welfare of everybody. And one interesting thing Maharaj Parikshit would observe, that as he would travel to the various parts across the whole earth, he would see wherever he would go, he would continuously hear various singers who would sing the glories of his great forefathers, who were all devotees of the Lord, especially the Pandavas. And they would also sing the glories of Lord Krishna and his pastimes. Of course, nowadays, if you go around, you will hear different kinds of film music, different kinds of pop music. But in those times, it was just the beginning of Kali Yuga, so still there was some piety. So wherever they would go, they would hear actually singing of the glories of the Lord and his devotees. There was description of the great activities, these songs that were being sung, they were description of the great activities of the Pandavas. There was also not just glorification of the Pandavas, there was also people singing the glories of Parikshit Maharaj, of how he was born, how he was protected by the Lord from the Brahmastra attack of Ashwathama, and how Krishna loved the children of Kunti and that whole family. So Maharaj Parikshit would be so overwhelmed by hearing this kind of a sweet description. So this is very interesting and very important to note also that the scriptures say that the object of our glorification, our singing, if it is directed towards the Lord and his devotees, then it will purify us and everybody else who hears. Because the glories of the Lord and the devotees are actually on the platform of transcendence. They are Vishuddha Sattva. They are not influenced by the modes of nature. All other kinds of glorification, singing are all in the three modes. Especially nowadays in Kali Yuga, it is practically almost everything either in Rajogun or Tamogun. Rajogun at best, Sattvagun is very few, unless it is some classical music. Other than that, practically most of the singing is in the modes of Rajo and Tama. So when these singers would glorify, wherever he would go, he would see that the glories of the Pandavas have spread far and wide. And why is this kind of a singing important? Because this kind of singing of the life and activities of great souls is actually a form of education for the masses. This kind of singing and glorification creates the right role models in society. How are role models created? What we glorify in society commonly is what people look up to. If you glorify football stars, that is what people will look up to. If you glorify film stars, that is what people will look up to. That is why whom we glorify is very important. Of course, singers can be glorified for their singing. Actors can be glorified for their acting. We don't have a problem with that. But sadly in Kali Yuga, because people are not very intelligent, if a person is simply famous, they blindly follow everything that that person does. That is the sad thing. And Krishna mentioned this in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that whatever great people do, common men follow. Yadyat acharati shreshtas tatta devetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurte janas tad anuvartate. Common people simply emulate their activities. And that is why it is important that we be sensitive and careful about whom we project as the role models. Should it be the learned, saintly kings and devotees, or just simply entertainers / sportsmen and others? Of course, this is not a criticism of anybody. But to create the right culture, to create the right role models, it is important to glorify the right qualities, the right behavior, and especially those individuals who actually set a wonderful example of the qualities and values that the scriptures are espousing. So Maharaj Parikshit, wherever he would go, when he would see this kind of beautiful singing, he would actually give gifts to these singers, to would reward them with valuable necklaces, clothing, etc. So he would be happy, the singers would be happy, the singers, because they're taken care of, they would also enthusiastically do more and more, and in that way perform the task of spiritual education. And these kind of practices were there in India until probably last 50, 60, 70 years ago. There would be people who would go around town singing the glories of the Lord, singing songs, bhajans, and in return people will give them some charity. Or even performers would focus performances on the Lord, the devotees, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and so many other pastimes. And that used to be the enjoyment and recreation of the people in general. And that is why the qualities of the generation were much more better than what we see today. Anyway, so Parikshit would be, actually when Parikshit would, Maharaj would hear all these beautiful stories, amongst all the glories, you know what he would like the most? The Bhagavad says, especially Maharaj Parikshit would like those narrations, those pastimes where he would see how sweet was the affectionate relationship between the Pandavas and Lord Krishna. And especially when he would hear and see, even though Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality, how intimate he was with the Pandavas. He was so intimate that even being the Lord of everybody, Ajopi san, Avyayatma, Bhutanam, Ishwaropi san, even though I'm the Lord of everybody, the Lord would actually have such sweet exchanges, and sometimes out of his affection, he would even perform menial services for his devotees, the Pandavas. Sometimes as a messenger, he went to Hastinapur on behalf of the Pandavas. As a friend with them all the time, sitting together, eating, joking, being the chariot driver of Arjun, taking such a humble position. We discussed this a few classes ago, how he became a chariot driver, like a very humble position. When Karna was anytime referred to as Sutaputra, he would feel insulted. The son of a charioteer. He would feel insulted. Oh, he always wanted to be king. That's why when Duryodhan made him a king of Anga, Karna became so happy and said, okay, at least now I have become king. I don't want to be recognized as Sutaputra. But here on the other hand, Dwarkadhish, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is himself offering and becoming the chariot driver of his devotee Arjuna. Let's see how affectionate the Lord is. That he takes sometimes the position of being a servant of his devotee. The whole world is meant to serve the Lord. All of us are his part and parcel. Jiver Swarupoi Krishner Nityadas. All of us are supposed to serve the Lord. But the scriptures say this process of bhakti is so wonderful, it's so amazing, that when the devotee genuinely becomes a devotee, surrendered to the Lord, always working for his welfare, the Lord reciprocates by rendering service to the devotee. That's amazing. That the Lord starts acting as if he's a servant of his devotee, out of his affection. And the Lord doesn't do this obviously out of force. He does it because he so much loves his devotee that he enjoys rendering various services to his devotees. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita, if you remember, there's this beautiful verse, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janaha paripasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahami aham. In that verse, Krishna says, those who are always thinking of me with great love and devotion, Nitya Abhiyukta, those who are always connected to me in this way, Tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahami aham. What does he say? I carry the burden, vahami. I carry that burden of their maintenance. Whatever they lack, I will provide. Whatever they have, I will protect. I carry that burden myself. Krishna says that proudly. He doesn't say, okay, I arrange for it. Krishna enjoys taking charge of the lives of his devotees and personally engineering and arranging things in such a way that he personally makes all these things happen, personally renders these kind of services, and he actually enjoys serving his devotees. So while so many others want so many favors from God, and some foolish people, they want to become God. It's never possible to become God, but so they think and so they try. But here, a devotee of the Lord, in one sense, Prabhupada would say, actually attains a position greater than God. Why? Because even God becomes his servant. Of course, not that the devotee wants the Lord to be servant. The devotee never thinks of the Lord like that. The devotee never forgets his own position as a servant of the Lord eternally. But the Lord takes pleasure. And this kind of an observance that Parikshit Maharaj had when he would hear the stories of the Pandavas and how their relationship was, he would be so overwhelmed. His heart would melt with devotion when he would see this extraordinary character of the Lord. So as this would happen, and as he was traveling, as he was enjoying, it so happened at one time when Maharaj Parikshit was traveling around the earth, he suddenly came to a particular point on earth where he saw an amazing scene. Now, this is where the actual key part of the chapter starts. So please hear carefully. He saw a very amazing scene. What did he see? He saw a bull and a cow talking to each other and having a conversation. But this was not an ordinary bull, nor was it an ordinary cow. Who was this bull? This bull was Dharma personified, the personality of religion, Dharma. And who was the cow? The cow was Mother Earth herself. But in this particular scene, Maharaj Parikshit observed that this Mother Earth is looking extremely sad. She is grieving as if she has lost a calf. She had tears in her eyes, and the beauty of her body was lost. And Dharma was asking her questions. So this is a very interesting point, and we'll come to what those questions were. But I just want to mention a few points before I go into the questions and their conversation. We should understand what is the relevance of the bull and the cow in our culture. So within the Sanatana Dharma tradition, Dharma, the personification of Dharma, is considered the bull. The bull has 4 legs, and those 4 legs of the bull represent the 4 pillars of religion, or the 4 pillars on which religion stands. Does anybody remember what are those 4 pillars? We have been discussing this multiple times, and I had mentioned that this is discussed in the Bhagavad.
Tapa, Saucha, Daya, and one more is there. Tapa, Saucham, Daya, and I forget the 4th one.
Satya. Satya, Daya, Tapa, and Shaucham. Yes, thank you, Suyash. So the 4 principles, these are the 4 key principles on which religion is based. Again, Satya, truthfulness; Daya, compassion, mercy; Tapaha, performance of austerity; and Shaucham, cleanliness. Cleanliness is purity, internal and external purity. These four are the very basis of dharma. Now, this is a very, very important point. So all of us should understand this point very clearly. When we talk about religion, when we talk about philosophy, philosophy leads us to the establishment of certain values which are key, indispensable, and essential parts. So philosophy leads us to values, and dharma is based on these four values: truthfulness, mercy, austerity, and cleanliness. So if any religious system is devoid of these four, then it is not a properly balanced or a pure religious system. The religious system must be based on these four principles. Dharma stands on these four legs. If any one of the legs is missing, then dharma is, like in Hindi they say dagmag, which means tottering. In fact, in this particular situation, it is said this bull was standing on one leg, this personification of, because three of his legs were broken. So there's this conversation happening, and we'll come to why and how. But these four principles are very important, and no matter what philosophical system, which religion, which school of philosophy, if it is not based or building on top of these four principles, then it is not actually a proper, complete religious system. Based on these values, the whole culture of religion is developed, and that culture involves the various rituals, the various festivals, the various cultural observances, the various practices, traditions. They are all evolution from these essential values. But if the value itself is misplaced, is not sufficiently emphasized, then one cannot have a well-balanced spiritual system. A well-balanced system is designed in such a way that it takes us gradually closer and closer to the Supreme Lord. But if one of these legs is missing, what happens? What would happen to a bull if one of his legs is cut? He will stumble. He will struggle to move ahead. What will happen if two of his legs are cut? Even worse. What if three? What if all four? He cannot move at all. So scriptures say that, and this is mentioned in many scriptures, this is again being re-emphasized here, that dharma is based on these four. So every human society which is civilized and progressive must be based on these four principles. Otherwise, it is considered degraded. Sanatana Dharma is very much based on these four principles. In fact, the duties across all the varnas and all the ashrams always keep these four principles in mind, according to obviously the levels of the four varnas and the four ashramas. The Lord at the beginning of creation gives various duties to various living entities based on the four varnas and the four ashrams, based on these four principles, and everybody is expected to follow. When the principles of religions are properly followed, then society becomes happy. Then earth becomes happy. Mother Earth, who's represented by a cow, she becomes happy when the principles of religion are properly followed and properly protected. And whose responsibility it is to ensure these principles are protected and followed? It is the responsibility of the executive head of the state to ensure that they are followed. So in this case, obviously, it was Parikshit Maharaj's responsibility, and that is why he was concerned. And that is why this conversation was especially of interest to him. That is why when the sages asked him, is this really important for us to discuss? Sudha Goswami said, yes. This is the crux of the matter. And this is actually the problem statement. The problem statement is that the bull of dharma is tottering. It has lost three of its legs. It's tottering on one leg. And just see how Mother Earth is suffering so much that she is crying. So our Sanatan Dharma explains this very beautifully. It says that for any culture to be happy, for any society, sorry, not culture, for any society to be happy, the proper execution of these principles of dharma are very important. And for a happy society like this and for proper execution of dharmic duties in a society, two things are very important, or two entities are very important. Again, for a society to be happy and prosperous, both materially and spiritually. I'm not just saying only spiritually, both materially and spiritually. And they are interlinked. Because when we talk about happiness here, please understand, when we talk about happiness, when we talk about happiness, the word used in the scriptures is sukha. And sukha is not just about an excitement, which means I hear something nice, I taste something nice. That is excitement. Sukha, which is loosely translated happiness, is accompanied by a feeling of genuine satisfaction, with a pleasure, with a satisfaction of the mind. The mind is pleased, the heart is pleased. There is a sense of peace and being pleased that is essential to the idea of sukha. And that is why scriptures say you cannot experience proper sukha unless you properly follow dharma. And that is why sukha doesn't simply come from success. Sukha doesn't simply come from success. Sukha comes from the proper observance of one's dharma. It's a very interesting point. I'm going to be discussing this very briefly. If you want, later we can discuss a bit more deeper. But this is a very interesting point because success is simply the meeting of a goal. Yes, for example, I want to be a millionaire, if that is my goal. If I become a millionaire, I have become successful. Yes. Let's say my goal is to become a CEO of an organization. And I work hard, I do everything, and I become a CEO. What will the world say? Oh, he has been successful. He's a successful man. But scriptures are very clear. Success not equal to happiness, is not necessarily equal to sukha. And this is where modern civilization goes wrong, because they think that simply by achieving success, I will get sukha, I'll become happy. And in the process of pursuit of success, people compromise all kinds of religious principles. They compromise dharma. So they may still achieve success. How will that success give any actual satisfaction or happiness? Ashantasya kuto sukham, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very deep and profound point. I'm just briefly mentioning it. If you want, we can discuss it another day. But it's very important to understand in the Vedic culture, the goal is still happiness. Success can lead to happiness if success is achieved according to proper dharmic principles. But success which is violating dharmic principles doesn't lead to happiness. But if one follows dharmic principles but doesn't necessarily get the success, he is still happy even simply in the process of execution of the dharmic principles, because that is the nature of dharma. Dharma nourishes the soul, nourishes one beings. That is why the word dharma, which comes from the root dhri, dhri means that which sustains, that which nourishes. That is why when one follows one's duties properly according to the principles of dharma, that itself, whether the result is success or not a success, that process itself nourishes and makes the individual happy if he follows his proper duties. Even though he may have to go through external inconvenience, even though there may be tapaha. Tapa means doing your duties whether you like it or not, doing your duties whether there is, even if there is inconvenience, even if there is opposition, there is an internal sense of satisfaction and peace. And this is what actually modern civilization is missing, because they fail to understand the subtleties of how actually dharma is essential for the happiness, a true happiness for a society, both materially and spiritually. So that is why the scriptures in our tradition emphasize or describe dharma as a bull. And it says that for any society to be happy, two things must be taken care of: the cows and the brahmanas. Now, this may seem very regressive to many people. Oh, what is this? Why, for a happy society, I need cows and Brahmins? This is, when I first heard this, I had a tough time trying to understand. Why I need science, I need factories, I need this. Why I need cows and Brahmins? If you note, many places the scriptures talk about cows and Brahmins. When we pray to Krishna, what do we say? Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Go Brahmanya Hitaya Cha, Jagad Hitaya Krishnaya, Govindaya Namo Namaha. Who is Krishna? Go Brahmanya Hitaya. He who is the well-wisher and protector of the cows and the Brahmins. That is how Krishna is described. Why Krishna is so fond of cows and Brahmins? What is the problem with engineers? What is the problem with businessmen? Now, this point is very important to understand. Of course, the Lord loves everybody, but the Lord is especially concerned about the protection of these two entities, because the bull of dharma can stand properly on the four legs only if these two entities are protected and nourished and supported by society. So I'll be discussing this topic briefly the next week in the next class. The same topic actually continues with respect to the detailed conversation. So we'll discuss a bit more in the next time. Otherwise, we are almost short of time. We have very few minutes remaining. So I'm not going to go into detail, but suffice to say that when the cows and the brahmanas are properly protected, then dharma can flourish. In a simple way, I'll explain very briefly. We can discuss more detail later. Brahmanas are important because Brahmins are the spiritual educators of society. They are teaching dharma, and they are also guiding the king how to execute and govern properly, so that dharma is always upheld and protected. See, dharma is not just, it's very dynamic. The truth of dharma must be properly understood. It is not that you can just Google up, what should I do in this situation? Answer, Google will give you answer. Now, this is what you should do. No, dharma is very dynamic. Dharma is very deep. In certain situations, it's very confusing sometimes. What is the proper duty to do? Should I fight or should I not fight? Should I give up or should I not give up? Sometimes those who even want to do what is right, sometimes it's difficult to know what is right. And we face similar situations. This is known as dharma sankat. Sometimes we don't know what is the right thing to do. And that is why guidance is needed. We need guidance of those who understand the subtleties of dharma properly. And that is why the Brahmanas perform that role. That's why ancient kings always had Brahmanas guiding them, so that when there would be a situation of significant challenge and complexity, the kings would seek the guidance from the great sages. See this in Ramayana, see this in Mahabharata, see this across the scriptures. The Brahmanas teach and guide. They are the counselors of society. If they are not there, then who's going to protect dharma? So that is the Brahmanas. Then where do the cows come? When we talk about cows or go, we're talking about both the bulls and the cows. Both are very important. Why are they important? While Brahmanas are giving guidance about the practice of religion, the bulls and the cows make it possible to follow the principles of religion. Very interesting. How? Because to properly follow the principles of religion, one must follow a principles of simple living, high thinking. One needs food grains, which the bull provides by tilling the land, and one needs milk. Milk, which is so nourishing for us, a sattvic food, which is provided by the cow. And the milk and the products of the milk are not simply used by consumption, but they are also used for various ritualistic performances, which lead to a further evolution. So all these kinds of sattvic foods, as well as the performance of rituals which need the sattvic products like milk, yogurt, ghee, etc., are possible by the bull and the cow. So the Brahmanas guide the society, but the cows and the bulls make it possible. That is why the cow is considered a mother and a bull is considered like a father. And that is why Vedic scriptures are so emphatic that cows and bulls must be protected under all situations. Attacking and killing a cow or a bull is like a murder and should be punishable by death. The scriptures are very emphatic on this. Both the cows, meaning both cow and when I say go, again cows and bulls, as well as the Brahmanas should be protected. Because if they are protected, then dharma will be protected. If dharma is protected, everybody will be happy. The engineer will be happy, the doctor will be happy, the soldier will be happy, the student will be happy, the government will be happy, everybody will be happy. Okay, we can discuss a bit more on this later. But that is why, because Maharaj Parikshit saw this cow and bull conversation, he became very concerned. So essentially in this conversation, I'm going to briefly mention because quite a few points I've already mentioned. The bull, Dharma, is asking mother cow, why is it that you're so miserable? Why is it you're so sad? Are you sad because now that Kali Yuga has come, people have stopped being religious? Is it because now Brahmanas have also started being corrupted? That rather than actually being truthful all the time, now they have become subservient to those who have money and they are not properly upholding the principles of religion. Brahmanical culture started going down when Kali Yuga started. Is that the reason why you are sad? Or are you sad because the rulers in Kali Yuga are not again properly upholding dharma? And they are allowing people to violate the four principles of religion. Satya, Tapa, Daya, Shaucham. How do they allow that violation? By allowing activities like meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. These four activities violate the four principles of religion. Are you unhappy because of this? Or are you unhappy because the Brahmanas are not properly learned and they are not guiding society properly? Or are you unhappy because so many women and children are not being properly cared for and protected by so many unscrupulous people? Oh, Bhumi Devi, actually you are so fortunate, you are so great. But how come you have become so weak? You are looking so sad and so forlorn. What is it? Actually, you are so happy and blissful because the Supreme Personality of Godhead just until few days ago was actually on your body. On earth, he was performing wonderful transcendental pastimes. And he came down to reduce the burden on the earth, that is you. And he performed such beautiful spiritual pastimes which opened the path for liberation. Is it that you are sad, O Mother Earth, because the Lord has now departed and you are missing him? Certainly you must be missing him. Because your attachment for the Lord was even greater than the attachment of the queens of Dwarka. Why? Because the queens of Dwarka also would only see the Lord on and off. But the Lord was on your body dancing and performing his pastimes. His footprints are all over you. You had his association continuously for his entire period of his pastimes. So how much more you must have been attached. So surely you are feeling much more sadness now that the Lord has left. So Dharmaraj started asking like this in a very beautiful way. And finally he comes to this point. So Mother Earth, very humbly, Mother Earth, who's in the form of a cow, she starts replying to the bull. And mind you, Maharaj Parikshit is hearing this conversation as both of them are speaking. She says, yes, O Dharmaraj, O bull, the personification of religion, I will answer whatever you have said. But actually, your problem and my problem are related. You are also in misery. You are standing on 3 legs out of the 4 legs of religion. 3 have already been broken. Only 1 leg is remaining, the leg of Satya. Daya, Tapa, and Shaucham have already been broken. The Lord was here on this planet and he performed so many beautiful pastimes, and the Lord is the source of all good qualities. And that is why I was so happy. And yes, now that the Lord has left, religion has spread everywhere. And there is chaos on this planet. I am so sad to see this situation. I am the mother of all living entities on earth, and it pains me to see the condition of the living entities as Kali Yuga is just beginning. My pain is similar to yours, oh great Dharma. And I'm concerned for all living entities. Actually, not even just about human beings, but even the Devatas are struggling. Because when the humans do not perform their duties, it affects the whole universe. And that is why it is so important that Dharma is properly practiced on earth, because earth is so critical to the overall upholding of dharmic principles in the whole universe. Earth is a very, very special place. That is why Varnashram system of Dharma is so important. That Supreme Lord, who is the husband of the goddess of fortune, was here on this earth. And he was roaming around, and I was feeling so fortunate. But yes, now he has left. Yes, I have been so overburdened earlier with so many kings and atheistic people, but the Lord removed all that burden by appearing Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Dushkutam Dharma Sansthapanarthaya Sambhavam. Lord did so many wonderful things, and as long as his feet were on this earth, I was feeling so ecstatic that my hairs were standing on end. How does the earth show her hair standing on end? By grass appearing all over. So grass would appear all over the earth, just like hair standing on end of Mother Earth. I would be so happy. And I would be immersed in the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. And I would feel so ecstatic. It was so wonderful to see the Lord and his pastimes. But sadly, the Lord has now left. And that is why such a difficult situation of Kali Yuga has come about. So this is the point that this particular chapter ends, where Dharma in the form of the bull and Mother Earth in the form of a cow are having this conversation when they are asking, bull is asking the cow about her misfortune, and the cow begins to answer. And Maharaj Parikshit, who is on the bank of the Saraswati river at that point in time, is listening to that conversation. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. In the next chapter, the conversation continues, and it goes into a very interesting dimension, and how Kali comes into the picture, and how Maharaj Parikshit and Kali have a conversation, and what happens. That is very key, because this conversation is actually very closely related to the destiny of Earth and how Kali Yuga progressed after that. So it's very interesting. So please remain tuned in. So that brings us technically to the end of this particular chapter. So I'm opening the floor for any questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so Amit has asked one question, since no questions so far. If Maharaj Parikshit was still ruling in accordance with the rules, why was Dharma on one leg and the cow was weeping? Because Kali Yuga had entered. See, the thing is, there are two aspects. Like what we discussed earlier, Dharma starts getting compromised. The beginning of compromise of Dharma is basically begins with the corruption of the Brahmanas and the mistreatment of the cow. That is the beginning of Adharma. And that is what happened. Maharaj Parikshit, as Kali Yuga was progressing, people were slowly, Brahmanas were slowly becoming corrupted, and that we just discussed in this chapter also. See, all this happens because of the influence of time. Yeah. So Maharaj Parikshit obviously was trying his best to make sure that the kingdom is properly ruled, and that is why he was traveling all over. But that is what he was seeing, that in spite of his best effort, in spite of his doing so much, the influence of time was so powerful that society was degrading fast. And it was mainly because of the Brahmanas degrading. Okay, any other question? By the way, one quick mention that it is said, we spoke about the four principles of religion. It is said that gradually from Satya Yuga to Kali Yuga, gradually religion intensity gradually decreases, which means at the beginning of Satya Yuga, Dharma is at 100%. Then at the end of Satya Yuga, beginning of Treta, it comes to 75%. And after Treta, it comes to 50% at Dwapara. And at the beginning of Kali Yuga, only 25% of Dharma remains. And by the end of Kali Yuga, it comes to zero. And that is when it comes to zero, is when the Lord comes as Kalki and destroys Adharma and reestablishes religion and brings religion back to 100% and inaugurates the Satya Yuga. Okay, so if there is no question, then we can end here. So thank you all very much. So please read the chapter, and it's very interesting. There are a lot of details I didn't go into. The chapter is very sweet and it is very important.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Hare Krishna. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Yay.